More deadly attacks close to Pakistan's border with Afghanistan, despite claims by the Pakistani officials that it has cleaned the region of alleged al-Qaeda and Taliban fighters. Just what's really behind this renewed violence, and how could Pakistan, the US or even NATO pacify this region? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Sahil Rahman. Yet another attack in Pakistan's northwest. The volatile region is said to be at the core of Pakistan's fight against terrorism, and yet it's fairly lawless and a hotbed of the Taliban and al-Qaeda. Now, Saturday's bombing took place at a World Food Programme distribution centre in Bajaur near the Afghan border. At least 40 people were killed and nearly 100 injured. Kamal Haider has more.
This the scene of attack where a suicide bomber targeted a World Food Programme distribution center in Bajaur agency. Victims were lining up waiting in hundreds for food rations when the bomber struck. Scores of needy were left killed or badly injured.
We have to, for a while, maybe stop the food distribution so that the area is cleared, people can come in and go out of this distribution site. And depending on the situation, we will decide on resuming our food distribution.
The World Food Programme helps millions of displaced by war and recent floods in Pakistan. For Bajaur's people, it was a day of horror as loved ones were rushed to the only hospital in town. Even in the best of times, this hospital cannot deal with large emergencies, but today was especially hard as it was also a national holiday. For those fortunate enough to survive, the scene nonetheless one of utter despair.
We went there to get food items which were being distributed. Suddenly a woman came and the blast occurred. Many people died and then I don't know what happened. When I regained consciousness, I was covered in blood and was in a canal. After that, soldiers took us to the hospital.
In the past 48 hours, Pakistan has suffered an escalation in attacks, both against civilians and the military alike. Bajaur may have witnessed another bloody day in its ongoing troubles, but the fear is that this will not be the last attack. Hours after the attack in Bajaur, there was no one yet claiming responsibility for what happened in that tribal region. Kamal Haider, Al Jazeera, Islamabad.
Well, joining me on this edition of Inside Story in Islamabad, Imtiaz Gul, terrorism expert and author of several books, including The Most Dangerous Place, Pakistan's Lawless Tribal Region. In Karachi, Shahnaz Wazir Ali, Member of Parliament in the PPP, and also Special Advisor on the social sector to the Prime Minister. And also in Islamabad, Strategic Affairs Analyst Saeed Pirzada. Mr. Pirzada, can I come to you first? Every time we speak to officials in the government or the military, they say that these individuals are remnants of the Pakistan Taliban and that they are insignificant, disorganised or even ill-equipped. After seeing today's horror, or certainly the Christmas Day horror we've seen in Pakistan, we'd beg to differ, wouldn't we?
Yes. Well, following the death of Baitullah Masood, there was a claim by the governmental authorities that now the movement has lost its steam, that the government forces are taking the lead, they are trying to dominate the scene, and that the Taliban movement is slowly beginning to die down. But as we knew at that time, and we know it today, that what we lost in the death of Baitullah Masood was the death of a leader. The infrastructure, the lower level leadership, the lower level, the second tier of leadership, that all survived. And now we have Mr. Hakimullah Masood running the show with all the ferocity and the ability that we saw in the person of Mr. Baitullah Masood. So I have to disagree with the governmental authorities in Pakistan. The Taliban movement is far from over. It has the momentum. It chooses the target. It hits at the time of its choosing. It hits the target, at a time of its choosing. And the government is on the defensive. And as the incidents of last 2 days today and yesterday have proved that the Taliban movement is vibrant.
Okay, let's bring in Imtiaz Gul. Imtiaz, how do you assess the situation, considering what Said Birzadeh has said, but also the fact that the government does often say, as does the military, that the Taliban is on the back foot?
Well, Suhail, I think usually most governments are in a chest-thumping mood, and that's why we have heard over several months that the Pakistan Army has got a grip on situation in areas such as Bajaur or Waziristan. But the reality is that in as complex a situation as the one currently prevails in the tribal areas, it is very, very difficult and I would say very unrealistic to give a definitive statement on the situation. One really can't say that it has, or the government has prevailed on the militants who are meanwhile dispersed. There are groups which had gathered under Baitullah Masood in December 2009, almost 2 years ago, are now again back to their original splinter groups, and they're operating on their own. That's why we have seen in the past about 3 months 3 deadly attacks. One was outside Peshawar in Dar Adam Khail, one was in Moman, and this is the third one in which militants have clearly chosen soft targets and thereby, I think, piling destruction and death on innocent civilians. So this clearly tells us one lesson, that we are into a prolonged war against insurgents, against militants, many of whom are, I think, acting on behalf of certain external forces, and that also includes al-Qaeda. And that means that we should really basically focus on how to get to the core of these people through better intelligence rather than chest thumping.
Okay, Shanaz Wazir Ali, we'll talk about your specific role, about how you look after, within your remit, displaced people within Pakistan and the issues of NGOs. But in terms of dealing with the Prime Minister, you have a direct line of contact with him. You know the dealings behind closed doors as to how they react, how the government reacts to incidents like this. Can you give us any indication as to how or what the government might say? They've kept pretty quiet so far about the Taliban and this particular attack.
Well, clearly we've seen an escalation in attacks in the last several weeks. But I think that one also needs to take a look at the situation as it prevailed 18 months ago and 2 years ago. And as you know, there was virtually the operation, war theatre was Swat and Malakand. So I think if you take a look comparatively over the last 18 months to 2 years, you have seen that the army operations have been successful in those areas. However, the government has always maintained, and I say this both behind closed doors as well as publicly, that this is really a prolonged war. The Taliban are a moving target. The al-Qaeda is a moving target. We know that it's sort of like a concentric circle. We also know that even though the first line of leadership in the form of Baitullah Masood is not there, but the fact is that, of course, there is a continuation of the same strategy. One difference, I would say this, particularly that since you asked me about the sociological perspectives on this, is that the several attacks that took place earlier, they were on girls' schools, and so clearly there was a message there. They were on government buildings, so they were attacking the state of Pakistan, and they were on army installations, army convoys. So all the symbols of the state.
But that's no different from any other attack. That's no different, though. That's no. Sorry, that's no. Ms. Shanaz, let me just get in there. That's no different from any other attack that we've seen the Taliban perpetrate as such. So in all intents and purposes, if we just focus then on the attack on Saturday, was the attack in Bajaur against the World Food Programme, or the tribe that was being helped with aid? They're described as a Salar Zai, and they were displaced during the military operations in that area because they are seen to be very anti-Taliban.
Well, I think that clearly I would agree with you to some extent that it is an unusual sort of a strategic attack, because normally what they want to do is they want to gain the sympathies of the local people by showing that the symbols of the state are not providing them adequate justice and welfare and so forth, and this alternative will provide them a better life. But in this case of the World Food Programme, this is really, I don't think that this is going to win them friends amongst those people. It seems like they were obviously sending several messages. One was that they did not want to, they do not accept the presence of international aid agencies. So, and it is really unfortunate that a situation where people are being given food rations through the World Food Programme, which has been a very, very successful program in many parts of Pakistan, that was a target. But the target clearly was that the international aid agencies. Now, we know that the World Food Programme has in fact taken great risks and penetrated areas where many other agencies would not have gone. Okay. And the other message clearly was for those people who they seem to see as anti-Taliban.
OK, well, let's give our viewers at home a little bit more context as to how this debate is progressing, because Saturday's bombing is the latest in a string of recent attacks in Pakistan's northwest, as our guests have already mentioned. Located very close to the Afghan border, this area is known to be a Taliban and al-Qaeda stronghold. Now, in August 2008, the Pakistani military launched an offensive aimed at clearing Bajaur of its insurgents. After about 20 months of fighting, the government declared the area as, and we quote, a conflict-free zone. Tens of thousands of internally displaced people were then told it was safe to return to their homes, but Bajaur, along with its neighbouring tribal regions, continue to be quite obviously under threat. Now, a double suicide bombing in Mohammed Agency in July killed more than 100, and earlier this month a suicide bomb attack in the same district added 40 more fatalities to the ever-growing regional death toll. Saeed Pirzada, there is talk at the moment and no specific confirmation as we broadcast this programme that it was a woman in a burqa that may have been the perpetrator of this attack. How significant is that in terms of the suicide bombings that we've seen in Pakistan across the years?
Well, if you look at the string of bombings since 2004, this situation has gotten only worse as the time progressed. And the incident, if it is confirmed that this was a woman who committed suicide bombing, that shows that the militants, the Taliban, or whosoever committed this blast, they are trying to use all the cards in their pocket, and using a woman also shows that they will not back off. They will use any segment of the society that they are sort of controlling in the tribal areas. And it is another horrific side of the story of the war against terror. Remember one thing, we all forget one thing, that this is a US imposed war. The people who are waging this war against Pakistani armed forces or the US World Food Programme as a symbol of the Western institution present in the region, and anything you say in this respect will be true. The reality is that the Taliban or the militants look at Pakistani government and the armed forces supporting the US policy, and this could also be a very strong message, and I'm very serious about it, that this could be very well be the case, that everybody is thinking that there is a war that is going to be waged in the North Waziristan area under the US pressure. It has become a statement of the obvious. The government of Pakistan has to choose, as the government says, only the time and the place, but the decision has been made, and even the US ambassador, President Obama, Mike Mullen, so everybody has said that the war will have to be, the battle has to be fought in North Waziristan. Since that is a message that has been sent to these militants and the Taliban or whosoever are fighting in that area, the reaction is going to be what we have seen in the last 2 days.
OK, if that is the message, and a message certainly by the Taliban, the response would be obviously something that the Pakistani military and the government would want to send out. So Imtiaz Gul, we're now in the middle of winter in northwest Pakistan. Can we expect any sort of response from the military, or will the weather be used as an excuse not to do anything for the time being, but to bide time?
No,
well, I think the military is already moving in conducting operations in the Moment Agency. They are partially conducting operations in the Orakzai Agency. The only, I think, bone of contention between the United States, NATO and Pakistan is North Waziristan, which is being called the Hornet's Nest. Otherwise, I think the military never took leave from these operations, and one has to actually keep in mind that what Pakistan, its military and other security agencies are dealing with is a criminal petty mindset. We have information that the Taliban leader from the Moment Agency, for instance, had barred people of Salarzai tribe from visiting the office of the political agent, and he told a few people within the Pakistani media that because these people did not stop from going to the political agent's office, that's why they sent a suicide bomber early this month, which you just mentioned, which also killed more than 40 people. So I think wherever there will be threat, Pakistan security forces probably would move in to neutralize that. North Waziristan, I think, is entirely different proposition. It would carry many implications for Pakistan as such, not only for the tribal region, but for the rest of Pakistan.
Well, Ms. Ali, can I come to you in Karachi then? How problematic is it for the government, for example, or even the military, to go into an area, clear it, say that it is now a safe area, and expect those that have been displaced or dispossessed to return? And in Bajaur's case, it was nearly 27,000 people. It's a huge headache, is it not, for you in the work that you do when you're trying to perhaps rehabilitate people in what seems to be, I wouldn't say a disaster area, but certainly a war zone?
Yes, it is indeed a really daunting challenge, because when the military does go in and an operation takes place, and and an area has been cleared, and of course it has been held and maintained, we know that it is very problematic. I will just share with you briefly that, we have been very heavily involved in trying to reach out to people in terms of their resettlement, but particularly in terms of medical assistance and immunization programs, and also education sector programs. And it has been exceedingly difficult because, as I said earlier, first of all, I think even the people are not completely comfortable. Obviously, not all of them, when they go back, their lives are not immediately rehabilitated, and it is a very, very difficult situation. What we are finding is that the militants are clearly hitting out at all the structural arrangements that government has in place. And as you know, these have been areas which in any case have historically seen weak government. These are exceedingly remote, very difficult to access, very difficult not only physically to access, but because of cultural and social barriers and constraints. So what the government has done is that it has certainly moved in certain places where there are concentrations of people. Teams go in, work with the people, assist the people, provide medical aid, security, whether it is also food rationing and any other type of assistance that the families need for rehabilitation. But as I said earlier, I think that this is not going to be an easy task, and it is really going to be a very prolonged situation before people actually can return to a completely safe, normalized environment.
Ms. Ali, then I'll just butt in there very quickly, because you say that the government is doing as much as it can, and I'd like to bring both my other guests in a moment, because we've seen in the past year, certainly 2 years, the local Lashkar tribes, the local people from that area, try to take control of the area with the support of the government, and they've been attacked recently, both their infrastructure and they themselves, and they say they haven't been given enough support from the government.
Well, I think that, what we have seen, what is the behavior pattern of the militants? Every time they attack all those who seem to engage with government in any form or manner whatsoever. People who are going to the political agent, as just mentioned earlier, people who have any dialogue with government, people who have indicated a willingness to cooperate with government. Government has been providing protection to a large number of people, and we know that this, and in fact this has also been covered by the media, but both the army and the civilian authorities are working in close concert. Now, the area is extremely difficult in many ways because the populations are not concentrated. The populations are still spread out, and when the movement of populations take place, it is very difficult to continue to provide security. I think that this is an ongoing battle.
Okay.
What I would say, the sign of hope here is that there are certain Lashkars, there are tribal clans and groups that clearly have recognized the fact that even at the cost of a heavy price that they are paying, that ultimately they will have to side with the state of Pakistan, because ultimately it's only the state of Pakistan that can give them long-term protection.
Imtiaz Gul, you're sort of nodding, I think, in agreement. I mean, what's your opinion about the role of Lashkars in security in those tribal areas?
We have to understand that the situation we are in requires a collective effort by the security forces, state institutions, as well as the community. Now, the Lashkars basically represent the community, and you fight insurgency with the help of the local community. This has been, I think, the traditional pattern. Now, there are some downsides to the Lashkars, but they are, I think, primarily an essential tool for confronting the situation that these areas find themselves in. And I think Shahnaz has a point that the state as well as the community shall have to collaborate. They shall have to stand by each other to fight this menace. Without that, I think the military operation alone, military involvement alone will not get us anywhere. We have seen this in Afghanistan as well as in other tribal areas. Bajaur is also, I think, a prime example that military alone will not provide a lasting solution. So we are in for the long haul, and we shall have to be patient and very, very calculated as far as our strategy for fighting these militants, al-Qaeda inspired militants, is concerned.
Okay, well, if we are in for the long haul, then Said Pirzada, how much do we have to look for help from across the border in Afghanistan, considering the Pakistanis have also said that they think the elements that created these blasts and attacks were masterminded across the border?
Well, the U.S. war against terror that is going on in Afghanistan, and part of it is also going on in the tribal areas of Pakistan in the form of drone attacks and other CIA operations that most people don't know. And the U.S. military is involved in 101 ways, directly and indirectly. This is the prime problem that Pakistan has confronted in the last 9 years. Well, Osama bin Laden, Ayman al-Zawahiri, none of those people have been caught. The existence of al-Qaeda is a disputed issue at the present time. According to Mr. the director of the CIA, Mr. Leon Panetta, there are about 50 to 100 al-Qaeda elements. Well, if you count the number of the air attacks by the United States on Pakistan territory, every single one of the al-Qaeda person should have been wiped out. But that is not the case. So basically, we are seeing a massive reaction. I'll be quick in terms of reaction to the U.S.
I have Imtiaz Gul shaking his head there with what you're saying. And I have to just very briefly come in, because we're coming to the end of the programme. If I can just go back to Imtiaz very quickly. Afghan, Pakistan and Turkish leaders shaking hands in Ankara over regional security. But what is the trust deficit between Afghanistan and Pakistan?
I think it's a triangular relationship. Everything would boil down to India. So we shall have to, I think, first sort out our issues with India, because that is reflecting so badly on the situation in Afghanistan. So I think unless Indo-Pakistan relations are smoothened out, it would be very, very difficult to clear the mess in Afghanistan. We shall have to have a regional strategy involving India, Iran, Turkey, as well as Pakistan and Afghanistan itself, of course. And I think for those who still believe that it's the American war, we should, I think, look inwards. I would very much say this is Pakistan's war as well. Meanwhile, and every one of us is getting affected, and we shall all have to, I think, own this fight against these militants who have piled death and destruction on Pakistan.
OK, well, therefore, the moment we leave it, but this debate will continue on Inside Story in the coming days, weeks and months. To all of my guests in Islamabad and Karachi, thank you for joining us on the programme, and thank you for also watching this edition of Inside Story. We do welcome your comments and suggestions. Please do email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. I'm Sahil Rahman. Thanks very much for your time and your company.